Today's topic, here's my tactics for talking about strategy. Welcome to TABLEscraps, short discussions about board, card, and tabletop gaming, submitted by the viewing audience and discussed with the viewing audience. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of TABLEscraps, the live streaming show where we talk about board games, card games, tabletop games with the live streaming audience. And I'm fortunate enough today because I'm not talking about this alone. I'm here with Ben and Randy. Hi, it's Randy from Board Game Corner and Snowboard Gamer.
That's right.
Okay, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But before we start doing that and introduce the topic, I just want to mention reason we're able to be here is because we are at the Extra Life event for the Colorado Gamers Club, who's raising charity money for Extra Life. So there will be a link in the description below to, even after the event's over, Extra Life will be still accepting donations for this charity event. So do that now. Please. Okay, so I'm joined here today, first of all, by Randy from Board Game Corner, who is co-host with Mark Street, who's been joining me a lot this week, and also by Ben from Snowboard Gamer.
First off, thanks for having me on, Chaz. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to get into this. I've been doing YouTube videos for a little over a year now. I just hit my 1-year anniversary. The name for my channel, Snowboard Gamer, those are my two passions. I love snowboarding and playing board games, so it just kind of came together.
And Randy, real quick, just tell us like your involvement with Board Game Corner, because Mark, I see Mark so much more often. I barely get a chance to see you. So just tell me about your involvement with YouTube in general and Board Game Corner, and how you fit into everything as well.
I provide the counterpoint because a lot of times we don't have the same perspective on games. Mark's very enthusiastic. I mean, that's what drives him, and I'm a little bit more analytical in the way I approach things. So.
Perfect. And that's going to tie right into today's topic. Great. Because as kind of a special bonus, Ben, I wanted to let you come up with the topic for today's episode. So tell us what you came up with for today's discussion topic.
So the topic for today's discussion is strategy games. What is a strategy game?
You were saying you hate that term.
Yes, I can't stand the word strategy game because it's got a connotation about being some of the deeper, heavier ones, but there's an element of strategy in every game. So what is a strategy game?
So you guys in the chat, that's the big question. Is there an actual applicable real definition of what a strategy game is? If there is, take us to school and let us know. Mark mentioned that you had an opinion on what is a strategy game or strategy game in general.
One way to start is looking at what is not a strategy game.
What is not?
Yes,
okay.
Because there's a category of games that Mark really likes.
Okay.
I tend to call them experiential games.
Okay, so Mark likes the thing experiential games.
Yeah, so it's like you're rolling lots of dice. You're basically it's the combat. It's the fun of saying, okay, I rolled 20 dice and I got 17 hits, and yay, I win. Because even though he did, this wasn't something he could plan multiple moves ahead.
Right.
It was, well, this is the way things turned out in this round.
The way things turned out. Okay.
And so there's a little bit more luck, I think, in the experiential stuff versus strategy, and I don't want to take anybody's thunder, but I think there's a tendency to think multiple moves ahead. Say, okay, I've got something, I'm playing the next 4 moves here.
Okay.
And allowing, of course, for a lot of changes as other players make their moves. But in general, that's what draws me to it, is I develop plans and watching that unfold and try to weather whatever storms come during those multiple moves.
Okay, that's fair. 2 questions on this, though. One for you, one for you.
All right.
First of all, the way you described with the dice and the luck and the I win because I rolled good. So is experiential game analogous the same as a Ameritrash game?
Doesn't have to be.
Okay, so they can be different.
Yeah, because a lot of times the definition of Ameritrash is it's fairly linear.
Right.
Whereas Euro game there's multiple paths to win.
Right.
So Mark you're looking at friends that are playing Ascendancy right now. There's strategy involved, but there's also this concept of I'm going to battle now. And since there's multiple paths to win, I wouldn't call Ascendancy a Euro game, but it's the concept of you can have this experience and still have it be one of many paths to victory.
Okay, so there is a differentiation there.
Yeah, I wouldn't call experiential equal to Ameritrash.
Okay, so my question for you, Ben, then, is Randy he defined it really well. Being able to think several steps ahead, create that plan that spans multiple turns, multiple rounds. So does that satiate you as a definition for a strategy game, that and that alone?
I would say not necessarily, because some games, they're only one step ahead. But when that's revealed, for example, King Domino, they flip the tiles. There's an element of luck, but there's absolutely strategy. Am I going to take that really bad tile first? That way I get first pick next time? There's still that element of strategy there. So my point is that there's strategy in every game. It's just varying levels of strategy. So when people call strategy games, I think sometimes it has a negative connotation that it's these 6-8 hour games of Twilight Imperium or whatever. Maybe that's more of a war game, but some of these really deep, heavy games, and I don't think that's the case.
Okay, so you think even something with King Domino, where you can be thinking maybe one turn ahead in the short term, that's as far as your strategic plans can kind of go in some respect. You think that still kind of qualifies, and because the term strategy game is so broad.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's see if people agree with you. All right, so our first comment here is going to come from Randy. And Randy says, a strategy game is a game where decisions made have a more important role in deciding outcome than random chance. So according to Randy, you have your decisions and you have your random chance, and as long as your decisions is at least 51% of the outcome, strategy game. That's a really interesting point.
That is interesting. I'm not so sure. I mean, yeah, my point is that there's an element of strategy in every game.
That's true.
What was the game we played earlier? The dice game?
The Cosmic Run?
Yeah. There's absolutely strategy in that, but you could argue there's probably a higher element of luck in that, but there's still strategy.
Okay, so even if a game was like 5% strategy and 95% luck, since that strategy's in there at 5%, you're thinking, it could still be.
No, I wouldn't call it a strategy game. See, now you got me there.
I usused to be a lawyer in a previous
Where do you draw that line? It's an interesting point.
Mr. Snowboard Gamer, I would like to bring to your attention. What do you think? Do you think that balance between luck and strategy, that ratio has anything to do with it?
It does, and I want to respect what Ben, I think, is feeling, even if you're not actually saying. I think the concept of intelligence, even if the game, if you're not thinking multiple moves ahead,
sure,
these games can require intelligence to play. And so there might be a distinction between what we call tactics versus strategy, because tactics tend to be a little bit more immediate focus,
yes,
and so it's tactical, and it might, you never hear the term tactical game, or seldomly do you. But that
not as often, definitely.
Yeah, that might be the difference between how far ahead are you looking. There are things that are more immediate, which would be considered tactical, and there are things that are farther out, which might be strategic.
More strategic. That's fair. That's fair.
Okay, let's move on to a comment here from Chad, who says, strategy games for me are games that make me think before making a move or action to get closer to achieving my goal. For me, they should also make a social interaction during the game. So here, it's not necessarily the planning, it's that you gotta stop and enact your plan while you're doing it. You gotta go and, okay.
So what about the resistance? That describes the resistance there, which people call a social game and not a strategy game. You absolutely have to think about it before making your move, and it's very social in the interaction.
But it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. You can have games that require the strategic thinking, but are still social games. I think they're more rare.
True. That's true. Now, this comes back to the ratio thing. With the resistance, really good example there. That one, I would say almost universally is seen as a social deduction game versus a strategy game. But is it because there is a higher percentage of social deduction, or is it because the social deduction, even if not a higher ratio, is so much more bombastic during the game? It is what draws the attention.
It drives the whole game.
It drives the game.
That makes sense.
Perhaps it's the driving factor that might have something to do with it. So
maybe so.
A game like Don't Mess with Cthulhu, if you've ever played that, it's a great, the Lovecraft theme is spammed way too much these days, but it's a fun game, and again, like your point is, there's a lot of planning. There's a lot of, okay, if I do this, then the bad guys are going to win, or the other team's going to win.
Sure.
If I do this, there's a greater chance of me winning. So there's still luck involved, obviously, but you're kind of trying to tip the scales in your favor. So it's a social deduction game, but there's still strategy or forethought required.
That is true. That is true. It can vary like that from social deduction game to social deduction game. And I think you're right. Don't Mess with Cthulhu is one that really does show a lot of strategy in it. One Night Ultimate Werewolf, to me, is nothing but a logic puzzle. Yeah. And to me, it has very little strategy in One Night Ultimate Werewolf. And so I think that's a great example that you just showed. So, okay. Let's go next to a comment here from Kabuki Kid, who mentions war games can be strategy games. Euro games can be strategy games. It covers a wide swath of games. Abstract games are usually purely strategy games. So, abstract games being purely strategic.
What's the definition of an abstract game first?
Okay. Well, that's a really good question. Okay. Let's say, for all intents and purposes, that for this case, an abstract game is simply one that has no theme, no generic pieces, no map, no, so something that you could play with any components on any surface with anything without losing anything about the game. So like let's just say like Chinese checkers. I could play that with marbles. I could play that with little cubes. I could play that on something that's just drawn on the table, and there's no theme to be missing because it's purely an abstract game driven by the mechanisms within it. There we go. A game driven by the mechanisms purely. So, what was the point?
Well, he was saying in general, an abstract game is a strategic game because that's what it doesn't bring any theme to the table. It brings mechanisms, and in general, those mechanisms aren't just one move ahead. They're not tactical. They're strategic.
There you multiple moves.
Yeah. So, do you think the more abstract the game, the more pure strategy game it would be?
The more abstract it is?
The more abstract the game, the more it is a strategy game.
I'm not so. That's a tough one. I'm not sure that abstract. I mean, I understand the point there. I don't know that if you slide the bar over more, it gets more strategic.
Okay.
I would agree with the point that an abstract game has to involve strategy because otherwise there's nothing else holding it together.
Fair enough. There's nothing that makes it attractive.
Right.
Fair enough. Yeah. And I agree. I don't think that the two are locked together on a sliding scale. So okay. Good save, because I had no answer either.
But if you introduce an abstract game that doesn't have any strategy, then chances are no one's going to buy it.
Yeah.
That is a really, I want to take the time. I want to go and try to think of one that breaks the rule like that. But I can't think of one off the top of my head. But I tend to agree with that idea.
Right.
All right, let's go to a comment here from Chad, who says, whether it be one against all or co-op, it makes you think and talk among the group. Maybe trash talk or helpful hints. It's all part of the experience to me. So he's saying it seems to me that the strategy is something that helps fuel the player interaction in a way. Games where the players have to work together, either against one player or all work together against the game, and so they're forced to cooperate, lends itself to a higher strategic experience.
I would agree with that. I mean, especially so one against all or co-op. I mean, think of Pandemic. It's
that's what I was thinking too.
You're all working together. You have to plan multiple moves in advance. To your point earlier, it is very strategic.
But it's almost like they're changing because you can't plan too many moves ahead because you don't know what cards are coming up. So it almost exchanges planning in depth, the planning in multiple moves ahead, to breadth of planning. You have lots of options of what you can do.
Interesting.
So because you have to coordinate that and choose amongst all these choices, maybe that's it's a different dimension of strategy.
That's a good point. All right, let's go to the next comment here from Chrissy, who says, it may be easier to find a definition going the other way. Ooh. What makes a game without strategy, such as snakes and ladders? Okay, well, that's where you started out.
Experiential games.
Experiential games.
But I don't know if I'd consider Snakes and Ladder a really experiential game. I mean, certainly there's an element of, oh, dang, I fell down a chute, or, oh, yeah, I hit a ladder. But is it... I don't know if it qualifies that. I mean, maybe there's another category for things that are lighter. Maybe it's a light experiential game or something.
Well, okay, let me ask this. Can you have a game that is purely a tactical game that is not a strategy game?
Oh gosh, where do you draw the line between tactics and strategy? When I think tactical, I think more of a war game.
Okay.
But then what are you doing? You're planning your strategy of your army.
Yeah,
and then the word comes right back into it there.
Strategy to me seems to be more like responsive to your immediate situation, and tactics is more responding to your immediate situation, and strategy is more for your long-term goal for the whole game.
Back to the King Domino example, tactical on what which tiles you're getting now, but strategic and how you're laying them out to try and connect all the same colored regions.
And I think it seemed to me the conclusion you came to on that is, well, King Domino is not a strategy game, but it is a game that incorporates strategy because it's too broad.
So back to the original question, what is a strategy game then? Because all games except for maybe the truly, like the Snakes and Ladders, I mean, it's just 100% luck and the cards, right?
Decision making.
And several people have mentioned that in the comments about where your decisions make a bigger
That's true, yes.
determination of the outcome than random chance.
Perhaps the amount of layers of decision making could have something to do with how strategic a game is.
Or maybe the impact of that decision. If it messes you up one turn, not a big deal, but if it has lasting impacts 6 turns down the road, you're like, man, I should not have made that decision. Maybe that's where it's
messed up your long-term plan,
your
strategy.
And Mark and I, we talk about some games I don't care as much for because by the time it comes around next turn, the board is completely different. You have no strategic or you have no continuity. You don't have enough continuity between turns to feel like you have any control.
Yes.
And so strategy becomes kind of moot. It's all tactical because you can't predict what's going to come up next.
It's more just reactive of what happens.
And there's still strategy involved in the sense of, I want to win, but you're evaluating chances of different outcomes. So there's tactics involved. But since there's no control beyond the immediate turn, there's no strategy beyond winning or getting the most points.
Maybe you could say it's more decision making versus strategic decisions.
That's good.
Is that a thing?
It is now. Okay, let's get 3 more comments here. Kabuki Kid mentions, Axis and Allies is famously a very Ameritrashy game, but it also has a lot of strategy in it. Strategy is everywhere, not just in Euros and abstracts. And I think that reinforces what you've been saying from the beginning. It's everywhere in different amounts, which is what, by its nature, makes it hard to quantify.
So here's one of the problems I have. When I talk about board games to my friends who aren't really into board games, if I say I like strategy games, you can already see the gears turning. They think it's like a 6-hour game of Risk. Like, that's what the non-gaming community thinks of when we say strategy games. And my point is that there are a lot of games that play in 30 minutes to an hour that have high amounts of strategy in them. And it's not just the long ones. They also have strategy.
What you just said, I was peering ahead at the comments. I think that's going to tie right into this. Another comment from Chrissy who says, this understanding of the definition could also be a problem with the language. As board games evolved, the definitions for other things like meeples we had to come up with those things. We just missed out with strategy being defined. Because it's a word that exists elsewhere and stuff. So yeah, it ties into what you were just saying, the language that we use. Perhaps strategy falls into the category of board gamer jargon in a way, because it's something that only means something to us in a certain way and not to others.
I wonder if it started, if you think about history, what was strategy used in lots of the big battles and war planning?
Yeah.
And so maybe that's why the connotation of strategy games are these big, heavy war games.
That makes sense.
Especially outside of the gaming community. I think inside now we kind of understand there's strategy everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's onto something there. Yeah, outside it's seen as the longer battle plan, and as board gamers we say, oh no, that's just an element of a game is strategy, planning ahead, and to us it's more of a little compartmentalized thing. That could be a good point. Okay, let's wrap up with a comment from Patrick who says, even games with random elements can be strategic, like Dice in Rolling Freight or Castles of Burgundy. Although randomly rolled, they give you a path of actions to take that can be strategic.
It's like the dice game we played
Cosmic
earlier.
Run. Yep, exactly. So even random elements. Do you agree that random elements can be used with strategic intent?
Yeah, because in many cases you're trying to alter the chance of certain outcomes.
Okay.
And I think maybe a different term rather than strategic is sometimes we use the term brain burner. I like games that are really brain burners or just moderate brain burners, something like that, and they go, something you really, really, really have to think about. It's like, how much thought? I mean, there's not really a defined measure of how much we're putting into it, but random chance, if it's pure random chance, it's like my brain doesn't have to engage at all.
Right.
If I'm really having to say, look, I need to do this and this and this in order for there to be a 70% chance of the outcome I want instead of a 30% chance, then it starts becoming much more cerebral.
Excellent point.
I think it's still tough to draw the line, though. Or maybe we don't. Maybe we don't draw the line. Maybe strategy games, we try and kill that concept in board gaming. Because you can't really define what is a strategy game. Back to my original question.
So what I'm hearing is that this hasn't helped you at all. Well, I think that's fair because honestly, I don't think we've even scratched the surface of this topic. So this is going to be something that definitely we welcome you to continue this discussion in the comments below because this is probably an episode that we're going to follow up with in the future because there's a lot more to unpack here.
Definitely.
So for now though, yes, please continue the comments, continue the discussion in the comments below, and also on the Pair of Dice Paradise Facebook page at facebook.com/pairofdiceparadise, or on Twitter where we're at Dice Paradise. We're at Dice Paradise. Twitter works a lot better when you pronounce your own handle correctly. But Pair of Dice Paradise isn't the only place that is involved in this discussion. Randy, where can we find Board Game Corner online?
Board Game Corner. That's our channel name.
Okay. YouTube.com/BoardGameCorner.
Yeah, I believe that's it.
I'll edit in whatever.
Please put it. Yeah,
that one.
I never dial my own number. So
yeah. Okay, and Ben, where can we find you?
YouTube.com/SnowboardGamer. I'm also on Instagram at SnowboardGamer.
Thank you, everyone. So that's all the time we have for today. But until next time that we get to have a conversation, thank you for joining us. And together with Randy and Ben and the live streaming YouTube chat, I've been Chaz Marler, who's been serving up some table scraps. Thanks. Take care. I'm going to introduce you during the episode, so never mind.
All right.
This is going well so far. There's someone dancing in the background, so that's awesome to see.
I think that's my daughter.
Mystery solved.